Welcome back to the Thunderdome, bitches. Yes. Hello, everybody. What is up? Welcome back to the channel. I am your host today, Gaming Legion. You can call me Legion. You can call me Jacob, whichever you prefer. As you can see, I'm standing on both legs. I am no longer sitting in a chair. You can also see I have a little something different. My hair got longer. Thank you for noticing. No, but I did get a new mic as well. The editing fuck. I'm sorry if you're going to hear me gripping the fucking mic sometimes. I'm still working out the kinks with it. Fuck off. I am very excited, ladies and gentlemen. My finals are over. I'm officially on summer break. Unfortunately, my shifts got decreased at my job. So now I have more time for this and more time to try and fix my sleep schedule. Hence why I am not as upbeat and energetic as I have a headache right now because I woke up at 1 a.m. and then played Expedition 33 for 5 hours and then went back to sleep. I'm not in the best space right now. I'm not in the smartest position right now. I got a bit of a headache. But you know what? This is the 5th time I'm recording this video because while I love this new mic, I keep fucking hitting the mute button that's right there like that. And then sometimes I'll just do that. So now I gotta fix this shit and re-record. What makes it even more annoying, it came with this bass that I actually wanted to utilize for this, but then I'm like, oh, the base of this is a little heavy. Let me unscrew this and I'll just use the little pole here. Yeah, that's fucking stuck. That's stuck, so I can't even use the little pole because it is stuck to the base. I cannot get it off. I've tried wrenches, I've tried my hands, I've tried many possibilities, let's just say. I WD-40 that shit, that did not work. And if I can't WD-40 it, well, we're all fucked. So we've been having fun. But yes, I am back, and since my finals are over and we are in summer break, I have a bunch of videos. I am excited to make this being the first of them because I told you guys that this would be the next video after I made a manhwa video. Fuck off. So here it is. Here's the emulation video I talked about, and I will have a lot more videos talking about more anime, gaming, and just some other stuff coming out, hopefully within this week or just over time. But I will be having a few more than one video a week now. Anyways, getting into this emulation, specifically emulation with the Nintendo Switch 2. What does that look like? Nobody fucking knows. Sail the high seas. Oh, we will become Luffy in the One Piece. We will become the Straw Hats. No, the fuck you won't. Because there's no way for you to sail the high seas without a ship and without a devil fruit, fuckhead. Well, you can't get over the Grand Line without a devil fruit. If you do, you're fucking weird. It's been coming up a lot since the Nintendo Switch 2 had their Direct back in April 2nd to be more specific, just over a month ago. People talking about with the game prices and everything that Nintendo's doing, oh, I will just emulate everything. I'm just going to emulate everything. And I'm going to try to explain to you why you either can't do that, or at least it's going to be a long while before you can even try and do that. Also, Nintendo just updated their EULA. That will be something I will be talking about later. Thankfully, now that I'm recording this for the 5th time, it's given me time to wait on that, and that's a good chunk of what this video is going to talk about now too. So I will be mentioning it later. It'll have its own section, but we'll get into it later. But to start off with, I think a lot of people who talk about, oh, I'll just emulate it. I'll just emulate it. I'll just emulate it. I don't think you understand what emulation actually is or how they are created. Or at least like, I don't know, 50% of you. So what is emulation? Well, the Webster's dictionary that I call my ass says process of imitating the hardware and software of a console on a different platform. Essentially, you are pretending that another console is just on another console. For example, NES, SNES, you're just pretending that that is on your computer, everything digital, including the hardware. Emulation also allows you to run any game that you have the files for as if it was on the original machine. Now, there are a lot of parts that obviously have to be remade and revitalized for an emulator to actually work. So I'm going to go over each of those parts in detail here and tell you how each of those are remade and what they actually need to look for to remake them in an emulator. First up, the big brain of the computer, the CPU, otherwise known as the Central Processing Unit. Don't worry, we are very tech friendly here. If you're a dumb fuck, I'll let you know. So Central Processing Unit, or the CPU, like I said, it is the brain of the computer. Literally any computer will have a CPU chip in it. In fact, there are just some other items that have CPUs in them, like microwaves with internet in them. Why the fuck does Spectrum have a microwave with internet in it? But essentially, the CPU has a bunch of instructions within it, a bunch of different logic that it will send and receive from all the other components so that it can make shit work. It's the same way that my arm is moving right now, and it has all the muscles and ligaments to do it itself. But the way I actually get it to move is the electrical signals going to my brain. Welcome to Anatomy 101. So how can you actually recreate a CPU digitally on a computer? Well, there are two ways to do it. The first is the interpreter method, basically taking every instruction and going line by line, reading one by one by one. And you are going to go down the list of each instruction path and recreate it exactly as the original console would, which is very accurate, but ends up being very, very slow, especially with more modern consoles. Well, Jacob, you might ask, are you a dumb fuck? Why the fuck would you ever want to use Interpreter then if it is so slow? Well, there are a few reasons, mainly for older consoles as well as developmental reasons. Looking at one emulator named, I believe it's called Mesen, M-E-S-E-N, which does NES and SNES emulation. The CPU is very simple for those, very easy, minimal instructions, so you can process everything very accurately. And even though, yes, it is slower than the other method that we have coming up, it's not so slow that you really notice it. Like, the processing power for it doesn't, like, transcend fucking God or anything. And outside of actual emulators, this does actually help with things like modding, debugging, and developing, because since you are able to go line by line, instruction by instruction, you are able to see where any crashes can happen. What do the registers look like out of each instruction? You can put new instructions in for things like patching and debugging. And probably the biggest one is public documentation. We're going to get into public documentation a lot more in a later section, but essentially being able to see where all the instructions go, what each of them do, and then put it out into the world so now everybody knows what it does. And the second method to recreating a CPU is the dynamic recompiler, or JIT, J-I-T. I'm going to be calling it the dynamic recompiler, because I don't know what the fuck JIT means. Basically, how this works is it takes blocks of code and instructions and it transcribes that and recreates that into whatever the instruction codes are for the new computer. One emulator that is very well known for doing this is the Dolphin emulator for GameCube and Wii games. What it'll do is it'll take the PowerPC instructions that are used on a Wii, and it will transcribe and convert them into x86. And for anybody that does not know what x86 is, that is the assembly code used for regular computers, x86-64. So a dynamic recompiler, take the code over here, transcribe it, convert it into the code that'll work on the computer, which is very good because it can do it very fast, but it is not always as accurate, and you cannot always go in and see exactly what the problem is with some of these instructions. Both have their strengths, both have their weaknesses, and both will always be used because, like I said, dynamic recompiler is good for modern consoles that have millions of instructions going on all at once, while interpreter can be good for public documentation. Next up is the graphics, or as it is more well known in today's modern society, the GPU, the graphics processing unit. Yes, the thing that handles taking all of the visuals and putting it onto your screen properly. The emulators are going to be able to have to simulate all the models, where they're drawn, how they're shaded, the lighting, any fog, anti-aliasing that might going on. And if you want to make it as authentic to the original console, then you are going to have to match any timing and graphical quirks that go along with it, such as, like, the PS2 had those little squiggly lines that I can't remember. If you don't have your squiggly lines in your PS2 emulator, oh boy, get the pitchforks out, bitches. One nice thing about emulators is that even though you're recreating the GPU, you can always enhance it because, you know, we're not in the fucking Dark Ages anymore. We're not in Doom, the Dark Ages. Fuck ass joke. But you can actually upgrade the visuals, so you can even get 4K and 1080p output on some of those older consoles. More specifically, one that we know of is the PCS X2 emulator for the PS2, which actually takes those from 480i. I don't know what the I stands for, fuck off, and it actually can upscale those into 1080p and 4K. More modern graphics also allows for stuff like anisotropic filtering or sharper lines, so that, you know, things look a little bit better, as well as custom texture packs and other stuff that you can put on there. Just, again, you can make the game look better and more modern. All right, the next component we have here is the RAM, otherwise known as random access memory. How I like to think of this is the short-term memory of the computer. You have your hard drive, your HDD, SSD, you have those where they store all of the files, all the assets for the game, all the code, everything. But when you actually go to play the game, they take all those files and put it into the RAM, into the short-term memory, so that it can access that all very quickly. And that's mainly what's happening during like loading screens and stuff like that. When you hit a loading screen, it is taking the files from your hard drive, placing it into the RAM, so that when you actually load up the game, it can quickly access all those files instead of having to try and search through the entire hard drive and find it all from there. Now, when it comes to actually recreating the RAM on these things, it's pretty fucking shitty because every single console has a different RAM layout as well as access patterns. So you get fucked. Every single time you want to emulate one of these new consoles or just an older console, you're going to have to completely redo the RAM layout and access patterns. Of course, there's public documentation, thank you very much, so that if you just want to go off that, you can. But when a new console comes out, you can basically throw out any old RAM knowledge. You're going to have to redo it there. And emulators actually have to do a lot more than just the RAM here. They also have to do the ROM, or the read-only memory, which is the game. They have to do the VRAM, or video RAM. They have to do registers and cache, all of the stuff from memory, basically, that just needs to be put into the emulator so that everything can run properly. And for any old heads out there, I say, as I was alive at that time, the RPCS3 emulator, or the PS3 emulator that is most popular right now, has to handle a lot of complex memory structures because of the way that the PS3 was structured around a cell architecture. If anybody remembers, PS3 is like notoriously hard to develop for because of the cell architecture, and that's why a lot of stuff would either go to Xbox first and then go to PS3, or it would just take a fucking long time to get on PS3. But due to that cell architecture and the way the RAM was structured, it was really hard to make games, and now it is also one of the hardest to emulate because of this. And now we have some of the last sections here. We have audio. Obviously, if you're playing a game, you would want to hear what's going on. Any music, any sound effects, all the latency and mixing needs to be ported over properly. The Citra emulator for 3DS was actually a bit notorious for this, as it had problems with audio for years because the way the 3DS audio channels and pipelines were all set up, it was very difficult to try and emulate that. Next up is input controls. Fuck hearing a game. Do you want to play your game? Do you want to actually play a game and not watch a movie, or, you know, a playthrough on fucking Twitch? Fucking weirdo. So yes, they also have to create the input controls and make sure that not only will input controls be read in the game, but that any controller that you use will actually be able to work. You know, stuff like your microphone, holy shit, like your keyboard and mouse, any like USB controller, or there's even the possibility for some OG controllers through USB adapters to get plugged in and used that way. Next up is the disk and file systems. I kind of mentioned this with the ROM part earlier during the RAM section, but basically you have to be able to take a ROM or ISO file, depending on what type of, you know, media they used. ROMs are for cartridge games and ISOs are normally for more disc games. But you have to take those and be able to throw them into the emulator, and it will actually read the files. Have to be able to make sure that it can, you know, do save data properly, and any memory cards for some of those older titles or older consoles. Next up is timing and synchronization. I think I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but you got to make sure that everything is happening at the proper time, because one big thing that you got to prevent that I think would, you know, take your emulator into the shitter is if you have unintended frame skipping, lag, crashes, and other bugs that were not even present on the original console. But one nice thing about emulators is that you can even improve the way that these emulators run, such as the SNES 9X. Can you guess what console that's emulating? That's right, the SNES. Good job. Good boy. They used the accurate cycle timing, which helps improve the game behavior, like compared to the original console. And finally, a bit of an optional one. It really depends on the console you're emulating, but there is the BIOS and firmware. And like I said, this is only for like a few consoles. I know the PS2 one needed that, but you don't need it for the PPSSPP, for the PSP emulator. The Switch one with Yuzu technically does need a BIOS thing. It needs the keys from the system, which you can get online. That's a whole different thing though, but it kind of fits in here. But that is all of the parts of an emulator, or at least the main big parts that are required to be there so that, you know, you can actually make an emulator. Now, what are some of the challenges with actually building an emulator and, you know, using one? First up is reverse engineering. You are quite literally recreating the console inside of another system. You are reverse engineering the whole thing. And a lot of this is done through trial and error and through documentation by the fans. It is very, very, very rare that somebody within the company is able to like get some of the information and get it sent out to the internet, or somebody is able to get leaked information on all of that. More than likely, it is going to be documentation from the fans. And not only that, you need a decent level of coding knowledge in computer systems. You cannot just be some fuck-ass Java developer and go in and just be like, oh, I know exactly what's going on here. No, you have to know how the hardware and the software interact with each other. You have to know some computer engineering and some computer science. I'm computer science. I took a class on this like 2 or 3 semesters back. I'm all about computer systems and how the CPU and the RAM interact with each other, how all that works. I didn't get to GPU. It was just basic computers, but I got like a basic understanding, and I can tell you assembly coding is fucking shit, because 9 times out of 10, if you're working with computer systems, you're working with assembly coding, especially with computers. So for anybody that has to like genuinely work with assembly coding, I'm so sorry for you. And I hope, please don't kill yourself. I know it's tempting, but please don't. And for anybody that doesn't know what assembly coding looks like, go look that shit up. You'll hate yourself too. You don't have to be a coder to realize that that is some bullshit. Next up here is hardware complexity. You know, the more custom and complex a system is, the harder it is to emulate. I mentioned earlier with the PS3, with the cell architecture, it's already hard enough to develop games for that. Trying to emulate that and remake that is hard enough in itself too. Mostly because there is also less general knowledge. Again, when the cell architecture came out, there was little to no documentation. Nobody knew how the fuck that shit worked. And this is one of the reasons why the Switch was so easily hackable, but I will be having a section on that later. Next up is performance, because remember, thinking caps on, we do have to take a whole nother console and put it on another console. And this is one of the biggest reasons why we don't have a PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X, and why PS4 and Xbox One emulation is so far behind, because the systems that require the power to emulate that are like high-end systems. You're going to need a shitload of gigabytes of RAM, a shitload of storage. You're going to be needing like a bunch of processing power, high-end graphics cards for this stuff. You're not just running those on like the average gaming laptop. And finally here are legal concerns. Yes, I know the law is getting into this shit. So emulators in themselves are legal. They are absolutely legal. But the way that they're used is not legal, or at least majority of the time the way that they're used. Because while emulators and playing ROMs of games with emulators is legal, the way you obtain those ROMs and ISOs is 9 times out of 10 illegal. The way most people do it, and I have done it too, Nintendo, no I haven't, is you find a website or a Discord or your friend who somehow has every file under the fucking sun, and you can grab the files from there online from your friend who has gay porn, and then you can throw it in there. Boom, bada bing. But that is illegal. That breaks copyright laws if you download a game file off of the internet. Now, if you want to circumvent that, you can absolutely dump your own games and your own cartridges and get the files off of those. But to do that, you're going to have to jailbreak your console, which will break your TOS agreement with them, which means your console can be IP banned. Or now with Nintendo's new terms of service, you could just get your whole console bricked, and I will talk about that. And if you're trying to emulate a newer console or dump the games for a newer console and jailbreak it, like, you're gonna have to wait a while for people to find out how to jailbreak it. Like, that takes a lot of time, and usually isn't as simple as let's short these 2 pins, go into recovery mode. Most of the time it is you're gonna need a mod chip, or you can get a third-party dumper, which is that doesn't happen most of the time. Now, this isn't all doom and gloom on emulation. Like I said, I do a lot of emulation. Like I do Switch emulation. Nintendo, no I don't, but I do a lot of Switch emulation. Nintendo, no I don't. I do emulation from the old consoles. I do it up to like PS2 and the original Xbox. I still have an Xbox 360 emulator that I use sometimes. And why do I use this? Well, a big reason of why a bunch of other people use this is because some of these games are no longer in circulation. Well, not some. All of those games are not in circulation. They're not making new cartridges of fucking Mario Bros. For the NES. They're not making new versions of Gears of War for the original 360. They are doing Reloaded, though, which is nice. But they're not making those games anymore. They're not selling those games anymore. The only way you can get those is through eBay, third-party sellers, if you can find it at an old GameStop or something, which is rare. And the bigger problem with that is some of those games are way too fucking expensive, i.e. any fucking Pokemon game being $60 minimum. Well, $60 if we're talking like Gen 5 and before. But then you look at stuff like Silent Hill back on the original PS1. What the fuck? Or Armored Core, which are all like $200. What the fuck? Yeah, a lot of games just being way too over expensive. So they're not in circulation, can't buy them anymore. And the only way I can get it is if I fucking steal it or I just pay out the ass for it. I would rather steal that shit. Digitally, steal that shit. Digitally. Physically will come later when I have nothing to lose. But the other reason why emulation is very nice is even if you can pay for the game, let's say you dump your own files, emulation is very nice because it does allow for certain features that the original console doesn't normally do. I mentioned this one before, but save states. Now, save states, for anybody that doesn't know, is essentially making your own save wherever you want. You know, you have your fast saves and your checkpoints within games that save for you automatically, or games that just while you're running around, they'll just save at any point. What a save state does, though, is that it will allow you to save quite literally whenever you want. It'll basically take a snapshot of where you are in game, and if you load it up from that save state, it'll throw you exactly where you were right there. And the easiest example I can think of this is Pokemon. And this is mainly used with people like shiny hunters or people who just, you know, want to do like a no damage hit run. Because especially for shiny hunting, what you can do is you can put a save state right before you interact with, like, let's say one of the legendaries, and then you can go in, if it's not shiny, reload the save state, and you can reset the RNG. It's perfect. Another feature is the fast forward feature. A lot of old games are very fucking slow, and so you want to speed that shit up. You can sometimes go up to 8x, and you can speed up the game and make it go a lot faster. Another one here is mods and cheats. I'd say another big reason why emulation is popular, because you could add mods in and do, you know, things that you can't do in the original game. You can add new features, texture packs, you can add in new audio, stuff like that. If anybody remembers Point Crow and a lot of the people who were doing Breath of the Wild emulation and putting mods into that game, that was a huge thing back then. And Mario Odyssey and all that. And finally here is multiplayer. I will say kind of shitty multiplayer, but multiplayer, where you can take some local multiplayer games and essentially turn them into online multiplayer games. Any couch co-op can be turned into online. And you also don't have to pay for an NSO subscription at that point just to use it. So that also saves you minimum $20. My headache's gone right now. This is actually very therapeutic. Now, why was the Nintendo Switch 1 so hackable? Why was it done so quickly? Well, this was done because of a hardware level vulnerability, mainly the Tegra X1 chip. For anybody that doesn't know what the TX1 was, this was a chip that was released about 26 months prior. In January of 2015, it was revealed, and then the Switch came out in March of 2017, which means there was 26 months of time where people were able to take this chip and figure everything out about it. The Tegra X1 chip was mainly put into stuff like the NVIDIA Shield TV, as well as some Jetson dev kits. If you don't know what that is, neither do I. Don't fucking worry. But the public already had this chip. They had 26 months to be able to go through it, figure out all the instructions, any bugs, any hardware vulnerabilities. And oh boy, not only did they have 26 months, the Tegra X1 chip had a big hardware level vulnerability. So I do not know everything about the chip. I don't know everything about how a fucking CPU works. Computer science, not engineering. So I'm going to explain this in the best way I can. If you still don't understand, sorry, look it up. But essentially, there is a tiny program within the boot ROM of this chip. And that program will run before anything else runs. It'll run before any software, any operating system, anything. And there was a little problem with that program right there, where if you were in recovery mode and you had it hooked up to a computer or, you know, just something else through USB, you could inject some code into it and basically overwrite the program. And you could do this through something called Stack Overflow, or I'm sorry, did he just say Stack Overflow? Like the fucking website Stack Overflow? Is this retard actually a fucking computer scientist? He's going into his senior year. Oh my god. Flow or buffer overflow. Essentially, you put in so much data that it quite literally overflows it. So then now you can put in any data you want and it'll overwrite anything else that was on the program. And why this is a big problem was because the boot ROM is directly put into the chip. This is not software level vulnerability. Like you can't just push out an update and fix it. This is just on the hardware. And it was on the hardware for about a year, which means any Switches sold from about March 2017 to around mid 2018 had this vulnerability in it, which means a lot of the initial release Switches you could brick very easily. Sorry, not brick. You could jailbreak them very easily. I mean, if you're an idiot, you can brick them too. Hell, I bricked mine. I bricked my first one. Nintendo, no, I didn't. So this was found by a hacker named Kate Temkin over in France. Thank you for Expedition 33, by the way, France. Finally, we know you exist. Where they used the buffer overflow in recovery mode and was able to, you know, create all this stuff. It is called, and I apologize, I'm going to probably missay this, fusée gele. Or Guile. I don't know. It's French for frozen rocket. Now, this is just my regular Switch. Nintendo, this is my regular Switch. This is a prop on the side. Don't even worry. So essentially how this will work is you have your original Switch that came out in 2017, early 2018, and you'll use this little prop called an RCM jig, or you can use a literal paperclip. And what you need to do is you need to get this Switch into recovery mode. And how you do that is there are 2 pins on the right Joy-Con rail where you short it, which means you can literally do this with a paperclip, or if you want to make it a little bit easier, you use your RCM jig, which is a prop. This is a prop. This is a prop. But all you would do is you would essentially slide it on right onto the Joy-Con rail, and now it's locked in. That's on the wrong side. Now what you do is you connect it through the USB-C in the bottom to a computer or a laptop, and you can inject some code using some files that you can get online as well as an online program. Inject it into here, and you press the power button and the plus volume button at the same time, and now you are in recovery mode. After recovery mode, you inject the payload, and there you go, you're in. It also utilizes having to put some files on an SD card so that when you actually inject the payload, it'll go to search for these files. It's not as complicated. It will take some time, though. And Nintendo. Props. These are props. I've never done this. I've never done this. So why was the Switch one so hackable? Because they used a chip that was 26 months well-known, one that had a huge hardware level vulnerability, and a way too easy way to get into recovery mode. 3 points that made it so easy, so easy to hack this console and jailbreak it. So within 1 year, around the same time that they started releasing the fixed versions of this console, custom firmware was already up and running, which means dumpers were up, which means any game that released on the Nintendo Switch, physically or digitally, could be dumped from the eShop, could be dumped off the cartridge, and could right away be put online. Now, like I said, around mid-2018, Nintendo did release new consoles and an update refresh with this vulnerability patched up, and as well with all the OLED and the light models, they also had this new chip all fixed up. So the only way that you can hack any of those systems now is you would need a mod chip. And for anybody that does not know what a mod chip is, it is essentially another secondary small little motherboard that you will have to solder right onto your original CPU on your Switch, which means you have to know how to solder a little bit. And you're probably going to need a little bit of money and a little bit of knowledge to not fuck your entire system when you try opening it. So like I said, because they were able to do this so easily and so early on, everybody was able to just dump the games willy-nilly. They were able to dump all the games that were on the Switch. It made custom firmware so easy. As long as you were not connecting to Nintendo servers, it was very easy for you to get away with this. And this is where the next point comes up, and some new information about the Nintendo Switch EULA, EULA, their terms of service. Thanks to GameSpot, I now have all of the text right in front of me, so I'm going to read this for you exactly as it states. So without limitation, you agree that you may not A. Publish, copy, modify, reverse engineer, lease, rent, decompile, disassemble, distribute, offer for sale, or create derivative works of any portion of Nintendo account services. B. Bypass, modify, decrypt, defeat, tamper with, or otherwise circumvent any of the functions or protections of the Nintendo account services, including through the use of any hardware or software that would cause the Nintendo account services to operate other than in accordance with its documentation and intended use. C. Nintendo account services in any C. Obtain, install, or use any unauthorized copies of Nintendo account services. Or D. Exploit the Nintendo account services in any manner other than to use them in accordance with the applicable documentation and intended use, in each case without Nintendo's written consent or express authorization, or unless otherwise expressly permitted by applicable law. You acknowledge that if you fail to comply with the foregoing restrictions, Nintendo may render the Nintendo account services and/or the applicable Nintendo device permanently unusable in whole or in part. Can you tell I did well in English? Good, because I failed that shit. I didn't fail. I didn't do as well as I should have, though. So what this all kind of boils down to is if you are using the Nintendo Switch in any way that is not normally how you use the Nintendo Switch, they will have the authority to ban you off of Nintendo services, i.e. IP ban you, how they've been doing it, and or they can completely brick your console. And for anybody that doesn't know what bricking a console is, that quite literally means they are just going to turn off your console. You are not allowed to use it ever. They will just like nuke your console, essentially. They'll break it. And there's really no way to unbrick a console. That's very rare, and especially with this, probably undoable, which means you are going to have to buy a whole nother console. Now, this is a touchy subject, and like, as a consumer, I think it's fucking dumb, but I understand why Nintendo is doing this as a business, because I kind of see this as the way leftists and liberals in America go after gun control. Now, I don't know everything about, this whole thing, so I'm just going off of my knowledge, but what my knowledge is that in extreme cases, liberals and leftists say gun control is just completely take away all guns. Completely take away all guns. Nobody's allowed to have it for self-defense, for sport, for anything. No guns at all. And to my knowledge, the reason that they say this is because guns are able to be used to kill people. It might not be the main use, but it is the most extreme case use of it. And unfortunately in America, it happens a lot more than it should, which it should not be happening at all. And I see this as kind of Nintendo's own spin take on this, where they're trying to get rid of piracy, people being able to just dump their games, or at the very least, like, take those games and play them without ever paying for them, as well as distributing them online illegally. So I see this as kind of Nintendo's nuclear option, where even compared to gun control, where killing people with guns is a lot smaller of a percentage of people who have guns are killing people with them, a lot more people who are jailbreaking their system are probably using it for piracy. And it's the same reason I believe that they are going after emulation so hard, because, hey, why do people use emulators? Because they're illegally getting these games. There is going to be a small percentage of people that are getting them legally. They're dumping their own games, or they're not using their Switch for piracy. They're using it for emulation of older games and other systems. They're using it for adding cool little themes, better performance maybe. And that's cool. That's obviously cool. But let's not sit here and act like those are the biggest reasons why people do this. Because you got to think about this too. Emulation in gaming is a lot more niche than you might think. I know everybody on the fucking planet, at least in the internet, is like, oh, emulation. That's those people. But when you look at the people who emulate games compared to the people who actually play games, or just, the entire gaming sphere, it is a very small percentage. And I would even say the amount of people who jailbreak their systems is an even smaller percentage of that, which means majority of the way people are getting their games, or in jailbreaking their systems and using the games, are through illegal means. So when the biggest reason people are jailbreaking the Nintendo systems and using them not as intended is for piracy, and you're pirating the games that they are currently selling, I can understand why Nintendo wants to get rid of that. Because Nintendo isn't going after emulators, or they don't really care about, if you're emulating SNES, GameCube, Wii. I don't even really think they care that much about 3DS. But when you're emulating and stealing their Switch games, the ones that they are still currently selling, you can argue about prices all you want, and I'm definitely here to have that argument. But like, from a business standpoint, that $60 they just lost because you decided you wanted to play Mario Kart 8, through emulation. That's $70 they lost because of Tears of the Kingdom. That's, I don't know, $60 for Kirby, whatever you want to say. Piracy does lose them a lot of money on these original Switch games that they are still currently selling. I think if everybody had waited until like maybe even the Switch 2 and was like, okay, now we can start emulating, they wouldn't care that much. And again, this is me understanding it from a business perspective. I don't like that they're doing this. I still do a lot of emulation. I like emulation, but I can just understand why Nintendo wants to do away with it. It's sort of a thing where it's not good for the consumer, but we were essentially doing this on borrowed time. Like, it was only a matter of time where we were getting away with this before Nintendo was really going to do something about it. I've also seen some people say like, oh, well, I bought the system. It is my system now. Why would I agree to the EULA? I mean, like, why would you buy the system if you weren't going to agree to the EULA? If the only reason you bought the console was to emulate and do stuff, why would you not just do that from a PC at that point? Maybe that's just me not understanding, but if I'm buying a console, I'm going into it understanding that I'm going to be agreeing to the EULA. Even this EULA, I'm like, yeah, I'm going into the Nintendo Switch 2. I'm not exactly expecting to emulate it. I've also seen some people say like, oh, well, if I do this on my PC, they're not going to be able to like IP ban me. They're not going to be able to brick my console. I'm doing this through my PC. No fucking shit, dumbass. I don't know if people are like saying that seriously or as a joke, but no fucking shit. If you do it through your PC, Nintendo's never going to fucking know. It's like, fucking obviously, people are like, we're genuinely talking about, oh, then I'll just emulate through my PC. Nintendo will never be able to find me. Or are they going to be able to like ban my console through PC emulation? No, that's dumbass shit right there. It's a very small minority of people who are doing it, but it still fucking pissed me off because I'm like, how dumb are you? Anyways, we'll move on. We'll move on. So what about the Switch 2? How is emulation going to work with the Switch 2? And how long are we going to have to wait? I'm going to tell you right now, nobody fucking knows, and it's probably going to be longer than you think. Because let's backtrack about 10, 15 minutes, an hour from when I started talking about how the Switch 1 was so hackable, and there were 3 reasons why it was so hackable. The first one being that everybody knew about this chip for 26 months, so documentation was already done. The second one was that that chip had a huge hardware-level vulnerability that, again, was known beforehand. And the third thing was that RCM mode was very easy to get into. Now let's look at the Switch 2. This chip is going to be a custom NVIDIA chip. And remember what I said earlier about some of the like problems with emulation and how it's very complex and hard is because the more custom a console, the harder it is to emulate. With a custom NVIDIA chip, we got no documentation on that. Nobody knows anything about how that works, at least from a fan perspective, which means everybody is going to have to try and break into that and try and figure that out. It has actually come to my attention within the like 12 hours it's taken me to record all of this and edit while I was scrolling through TikTok. And we have actually got the motherboard out there. And people have started looking into the chip, not as in depth as to find any vulnerabilities as far as I'm aware, but we do have benchmarks and some other stuff. So while the process will probably still take a long time to find something, it is in effect starting now. Now, I don't have the research on how long it took them to like break the Tiger X1 chip and figure everything out about it, but let's just assume 26 months. Let's be generous and we'll say 26 months. That's still over 2 years before we can even get into this console. And then that's going to be another year for custom firmware. So that's 3 years before we can even think about jailbreaking these systems. Excuse me, I'm eating lasagna in the middle of this. The second thing is that we don't know where RCM mode is going to be. We don't know how to get into it on this. Very clearly on the Switch 2 with the magnetic Joy-Cons, there is no rail system. So we don't know how you have to get into RCM mode. You might have to open up your system to get into RCM mode. Maybe there's a secondary device you need, which is my personal headcanon on how you get into RCM mode. How I think it's going to happen is repair shops and, you know, all these guys are going to have to buy a tool from Nintendo and it'll connect and go into the port on a on the Joy-Con port there, and that's how you get into RCM mode. There are other companies that do it where they only sell repair stuff to repair shops in these game companies, so that if you do need something fixed, you can go there and they can do it for you. But companies can only buy it, not just the general consumer. That's just a headcanon. That's not confirmed. There's not even a rumor on that. That's just what I think. And next up, this is all, I guess you could say speculation or just precedent. The PS4 and the Xbox One are still in development for reliable emulators. Hell, the PS4 emulator only even got started because Bloodborne was not on the PC, because Bloodborne was still at 30 FPS on the PS4. So they're like, okay, I want a 60 FPS version on a PC. That's the only reason the PS4 emulator even really got started. And the PS4 and Xbox One have been out for 12 years. And they still do not have reliable emulators. So with the Nintendo Switch 2 taking more processing power and, you know, being at a bit of a higher level than those, we're thinking it's going to be on par with the Series S. This is probably going to take a bit longer to try and figure out. Now, into the last little section of this video, why do people not want to emulate their games? Why do people not like emulation? Or why do people just not want to do emulation? Remember I said earlier that gaming is a huge sphere and you only have a little piece of it that actually does emulation. And I would say the biggest reason that there's that small piece and not a bigger piece is because consoles are just easier to use. Because yes, if you're looking at it from like, oh, PC emulation, you just get the emulator, get the games online, throw it there, boom. Compared to that, you have to spend $450 on a console, $60, $70, $80 on a game to play it normally. That's still easier. A lot of people would just rather pay the easy money and then Make it easy. You boot the game, you do some initialization stuff that is not hard at all, you pop it in, you play the game. Bada bing, bada boom, Bob's your uncle, you're fucking in. With emulation, you're gonna have to download the emulator. Depending on what system you're using, you're gonna have to get your keys or jailbreak your system for those keys. And with a Switch, you do need the keys, probably with the Switch 2 as well. You're gonna have to try and find the games somewhere online. You're then gonna have to download those games. And then you're gonna have to have enough storage because you're on a fully digital device. You can't use cartridges. Then you're gonna have to fiddle around with the settings a little bit to actually make it work with your computer because, again, you're emulating a whole other console on your computer. And your computer is running its own OS, its own systems, its own software, all of its own stuff on top of the emulator. And then you also don't have to deal with the legal stuff. Like, you just buy the console, you buy the game. I don't have to deal with, oh my god, am I in a legal gray area here? Could I get my system bricked? No. It's a regular old console. It's a regular old game. You're not fucking with it in any way. And if something happens where you bought a legitimate console in game and it's bricked, then there's a bigger problem than the EULA. But when it comes to emulating games, there is that legal gray area, especially when it comes to my scenario earlier where you downloaded the games from the internet. That is just blatantly illegal. Unfortunately, I do not want to deal with my internet provider calling me like 5 times talking about, hey, we noticed you downloaded Pokemon Sun through uTorrent. You're not allowed to do that. Yeah, my mom was not happy when she got those 15 emails. Now let's go to the next point. A Switch is still portable while a PC is stationary. And you can even tie this into the point of you lose a lot of the features of the Switch or the original console when you go to a different console or a different system. Like, let's say you're doing PC emulation with the Switch, you just lost portability right there. And while, yes, you can technically, still use a regular gaming laptop, it is not going to run as good as a PC, and do you really still think that's as portable as a Switch? Try pulling out a gaming laptop on a flight or in your car on a road trip. Yeah, you look like fucking Casanova right there. But then when you're looking at Switch emulation specifically, you are losing the Joy-Cons because Joy-Cons, like, at least in my experience, do not fucking work with emulation. Do not work. I have to do it through Bluetooth, and then it is very shitty, which means I need a third-party software like BetterJoy, and BetterJoy does not have many of the features as well. I lose out on a lot of motion controls, and it is very spotty with that. The IR camera is pretty much non-existent. I know the IR camera is already non-existent, but still. And Amiibo and NFC technology is completely thrown out the window. You don't get that. So I don't even get to play with the original controller. I will need a mouse and keyboard or another controller. So I just lost out on the whole functionality of a Joy-Con. And contrary to popular belief, a lot of people like to just lay down and use the Joy-Cons. Like, I like laying down on my couch sometimes and spreading out and playing with my Joy-Cons or just having my hands in different places. I don't always like to lay down with the controller right here in my fucking nape. The nape's on the backside. Don't fuck off. Another point here on why people don't want to emulate, because I would like to play my game right away. Mario Kart World is going to be coming out the exact same day as the Nintendo Switch 2, and $80 price is a separate issue here. We're not going to look at that right now. But that game comes out the exact same day. I like Mario Kart. I want to fucking play Mario Kart. I don't want to have to wait for the bare minimum of 1 year to get an emulator to possibly run Mario Kart. I don't want to have to wait years just so I can not spend $80 and then play Mario Kart after 3 years when I could have been playing Mario Kart that I really want to play. Same thing with Pokemon. I'm not going to wait years to play the Pokemon game when I can just pay the $60, $70, $80 and play it right away. Same thing with Metroid 4. Same thing with the Dusk Bloods. That's going to be coming out in 2026, but if we don't even have an emulator in the future in the works, why would I want to wait? I want to play the Dusk Bloods. So will I be spending a little bit of extra money? Yes, unfortunately. I did get the Mario Kart bundle though, so I got it for $50. Get fucked. But I want to play it right away. And you might not be that person. You might not be that person. You might not really care about Mario Kart. You might not care about Metroid all that much. You might be some dumbass that's complaining and you don't even play Nintendo. Like, shut the fuck up. But if you are that person, maybe you are perfectly okay with waiting a few years to actually get an emulator for that, and that is perfectly fine. But don't act like people who want to play these games, who are excited to play these games, are dumbasses because they're not saving every single cent and waiting 3, 4, 5 years, whoever knows how long, just to play the game that they want to play and can very easily play just by paying the money up front. And the final big point I have here for the video, and why people don't like emulation, or don't do emulation, is because it's really only the bigger games that actually get some of that attention. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, every game is fan sourced. Just because you can get the files off of a cartridge or whatever and get them online and put them onto the emulator does not mean it will run perfectly. Every game does need some tweaking to actually run with the emulator, especially if it differs from the original console in any way. They're going to need to do some tweaking to make it work, to fix any bugs or crashes that could be happening. So right away, any new game that comes out is not going to run as well as the original console. It's going to take some time for them to actually tweak that. That's why if you've ever used Citra emulator or Yuzu emulator, they always have that one section that says, hey, how playable is this? Is it perfect? It'll run exactly as it does on the original console. Is it good where you can experience some glitches and bugs? Or is it like maybe not playable at all? Is it only bootable where you can boot the game, but you're probably not going to be able to play it? And some of those games still have some of these problems. Now, it has been a while, so this could be wrong, but I remember, like, I want to say a year ago, I was looking at Legends Arceus and playing that through emulation, and that one was still having some problems. And that game's been out since 2022, so it had been out for over 2 years by the time I was going to do that, and it still had problems. So, hell, bigger games get attention, sometimes not even. And this is the same thing for mods, updates, and cheats. Some of your, like, lesser-known games are probably not going to be getting a lot of these mods. They might not be getting that 4K scaled upgrade, because this is all fan-sourced. And if not enough fans who know how to make these things actually make the things, they're just not going to be there. So unless you want to go learn how to code and all the hardware stuff that goes along with this, unless you want to figure out how all of that works to make these mods and cheats yourself, you're kind of shit out of luck. And like I said before, when a game first comes out, assuming you can get it dumped right away, it's probably not going to be as playable right away. There's probably going to be a lot of problems. And even after a year or two, like I said with Legends Arceus in my experience, you're probably still going to have some bugs. So taking all of that into account, so looking at all this, when getting an emulator can be difficult, getting the games for an emulator can be difficult and a legal gray area, and also how depending on your system that you're emulating on, it can probably run worse than just the original console. You really start to think, would it just be easier to pay for the console and you don't have any of these problems? Sure, you're maybe out $450 the one time. You're out $60 every time you want to play a game, but you don't have to deal with any of these problems. Just a lot of reasons why people don't emulate and don't want to emulate. Rounding out this video, I do want to say again, I've emulated before. I still do emulate sometimes. It's not like I'm completely against emulation, but I understand from a business standpoint why Nintendo doesn't like emulation. I also understand why emulation does not work for everybody. I also understand why emulation is not wanted by everybody and why that is not the ideal solution. But more than anything, I understand why emulation just isn't possible for the Nintendo Switch 2 right now. Like, think back to everything I said. The only way the Nintendo Switch 2 can be cracked that easily, that fast as the Switch 1 is if somehow we get all of the information about this chip and there is some huge vulnerability in it that somebody was able to find. And we find that within maybe the first month or two. Because if it takes us any longer, we're not getting that emulation. Anyway, to be or not to be, to emulate, to not to emulate, to be a dumbass or not, whatever. Be who you are. Be who you are. Some people want to emulate, some people don't. At the very least, if you're going to say emulation is better, understand what emulation is. Understand what goes into it. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Thank you guys so much for being here. I really appreciate it. As you can see, I'm a little more happy now. My headache is actually gone. I'm not even kidding. My headache's gone. I'm actually happy now. But I'm so excited to be back. I've got a new mic. I've got videos to make, and I'm so excited to be back. I got more streaming that I'm doing. We are currently playing through God of War 1. We will be playing through God of War 2 as well, up until this Thursday when Doom the Dark Ages comes out, and we will be playing that. And throughout the rest of the summer, we got new games like Death Stranding 2, Mario Kart World, Donkey Kong Bonanza, Shadow Labyrinth, a bunch of other games that we will be streaming, as well as a bunch of the backlog I'm going to be trying to get through, mostly in preparation for some of these games like Borderlands. But if you're interested in that, please go check me out on Twitch and TikTok. I will also be streaming on YouTube as well. I'm going to be doing that again. I'm paying the $20 for Streamlabs so that I can stream on 2 horizontal platforms. This will probably only be a summer thing because if I can't make enough revenue for even $20 a month, I'm not paying for it. But you know what? I don't got much going on this summer, so why not? Let's go a little all out here. So if you're interested in seeing all that in streaming, especially when the Nintendo Switch 2 does come out, because I got my pre-order, check me out on all those platforms. Check me out here. And if you are excited for more videos coming out, talking about Clear Obscure, talking a little bit more about anime, talking about more gaming topics, anime topics, maybe music. I'm actually thinking about doing 1 or 2 music videos. Well, videos talking about music. Then please, please, please subscribe to the channel. Hit that like, hit that follow, leave a comment, whatever you want to do there. And I will see you guys in the next video. Peace out. I love you guys. Fly right straight to your dome, you can time down.